Hey guys, today I'm talking about hydroponics, aeroponics, and plant cloning. I'm going to show you exactly how to build this really inexpensive plant cloner. You can grow in it, you can clone plants. It's really easy to make. It's not as difficult as you would think, and the price on it is only a fraction of what you would pay for a professional cloner. So keep watching and I'll show you exactly how to make it. So guys, the hydroponic system I'm going to show you how to build today has 35 stations in it. You have two options here. You can either just clone the plants you want to replicate, or you can grow them to maturity. And it's really simple, and it's controlled by a timer where you'll have 30 minutes on and 30 minutes off. And I'm going to show you every step of the way of how to put this together. So another note on the number of stations you have in one of these systems are the size of your net cup or your neoprene collar. So this is a 2-inch net cup and this is a 3-inch. And if you're wanting to do a 3-inch cup, you're going to probably want to go with a larger tote so you'll have more room. A 3-inch in one of these is going to be a little crowded, so you can upsize the size of your tote, and instead of putting it one on per square, you're going to kind of stagger them around so you'll have more room if you're planning on growing to maturity in one of these totes. If you're just planning on cloning, then you don't have to worry so much about the size of the plant once it starts to come out on the top. But when we're talking about growing to maturity, then you're going to want to space these, and it's going to be a much smaller number of plants inside of the cloning system. Now guys, where I've placed these neoprene collars is just to kind of demonstrate the number of cloning stations there. I'm going to remove them out of the way and show you exactly how to drill each hole. But one tip I will give you is I'm doing this on top of a trash can so all the debris can fall in there, and then I can clean it up after the fact with a very fine grit sandpaper, and that'll remove a lot of the excess debris and the plastics after the cutting. Now another note, this is a 2-inch hole saw, and what I'm going to show you is when you drill each of your holes, you can drill your pilot hole down to where then you want to reverse it. Once they've made a little bit of a penetration into the plastic, reverse it, and that way you're less likely to damage the plastic. Now, as you can see, it's a very clean cut. I'm just going to take my sanding block and go around it and just clean it up. And also, since we're over the trash can, all the debris we've created just falls directly in there. And then when I get through, the debris on the top, the plastic shavings, we're just going to also dump those into the trash can. Okay guys, we're going to dump our plastic shavings, and most of them we can, into our trash can. We're going to take our sanding block and just kind of quickly run around each hole to kind of clean up the debris that's left. And I hope you can hear me over this noise. And we're just going to do that with each one, cleaning and make sure we remove most of our plastics, because we don't want any of these small pieces ending up in our pump and clogging up the system. Speaking of your pump being clogged, you can use one of these pump bags that has a very fine mesh. Put your pump inside of it, pull the drawstring tight, and then that way that would prevent any small debris from going inside your pump intake. So you can get these, sometimes they actually come with a pump, but just thought I'd mention that if you want to make sure that your pump doesn't have any issues with clogging. So guys, once we have all of our holes drilled and slightly cleaned up, I don't think you can get rid of 100% of the plastic, but it's just one of those things you want to try to get as much of it as you can. But your net cups are going to sit really good in that 2-inch because it has a lip on it. So the 2-inch hole is perfect, and it prevents any of the net cups from falling into our solution, so they're secure on top. We will probably have to sacrifice one of our stations because we have the power cord coming out. Now we could probably have it coming out the side, but that increases the chance of a leak. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sacrifice one of our stations, put our neoprene collar around our cord, and then put it in there. Now it's a little bit loose, but it's not going to fall through because the cord is going to be securely in place. So just remember, you may have to do that if you don't want it coming out of the side. I feel like there would be more of a chance of a leak, so that's why I want it coming out of the top. So guys, we have a couple of options as to what to do in our net cup. We can either use clay pebbles, which can securely hold our cutting that we're cloning or we're growing, or you can use your neoprene collar at the top of it, and you can remove the center. This particular brand I've got, you can remove the center so it's not putting too much pressure on your cutting. So that's two options. I feel like the clay pebbles may allow a little bit of leakage, but as long as your top has this high lip on it, I think even a little bit of moisture will drain back into your tote. So guys, the entire system inside of your tote is going to be put together with PVC and PVC fittings of 1/2 inch size. I wouldn't use 3/4 because I think the pump is not going to, I think that's going to reduce your pressure. So I don't think the pump will work as well on 3/4 size. So remember 1/2 inch PVC. Okay guys, these are your PVC fittings, and one of the key components is this it's a 4 exit but 1 entrance, so your pump's going to pump into here and go out in 4 different directions, and that's one of the key pieces. These can be found at most hardware stores. If you can't find it, I'll put a link to one in the description, but it's a little bit harder to find this PVC. The rest of them are very common pieces. 90s, T's, those can be found everywhere. Okay, I'm going to measure our PVC, and we want it to slide into about 1.5 to 2 inches from the top or the lip of the system, and that will help prevent from overspraying outside. Even though our jets are pointed down, our spray misters are pointed down, we don't want it too close to the top because there could be some overspray and come out of the sides. That can also be helped with a little bit of sealant. If you feel like that it's coming out, you can just take some silicone and put around the top, and that will help seal. Maybe some aquarium silicone sealant, that will also work, but you just want there to be a really tight seal. You can also use different products like weather stripping around the top, but it needs to be rubber that will not dissolve over time like maybe a foam would. So remember, rubber weather stripping also would work around the top edges. Now the next thing we're going to do, we're going to measure our full width about 1 inch down, and we're going to guesstimate that's a little bit more than 27. I'm going to say about 27 and 3/16, and that's going to allow it to slide down to here, and it'll be tightly wedged in and less likely to fall over because the pump only has a single bar coming up from it. So we just want it to be really tightly fitted into the tub. So as you can see, a piece of PVC slips about 1/2 inch onto the pipe, even when it's pressed on really hard. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put one side on, then remeasure to know exactly where we need to cut it, because remember, there's going to be a fitting on all 4 corners, so there won't be a perfect fit if we don't take a little bit off there. Now I will tell you that it's not uncommon to have to cut the PVC more than once because there's a lot of variables involved. So just remember, it's better to cut too long where you can take off little sections, 1/4 inch of the main PVC, and that way if you're too long you can remove, but if you're too short, there's nothing you can do about that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install a T right here. So I'll need to measure exactly where that the main PVC needs to be cut, because this PVC, it will go in a little bit more than 1/2 inch in both directions. So I'm just going to put it about where I want it, mark it where it's going to go on the main pipe, and then that way I can come in 1/2 inch and I'll know I won't be taking anything off of the total length. Now I've demonstrated on this piece of PVC exactly how far the PVC will fit into the fitting. It's a little bit more than 1/2 inch. So that way I can use this as a guide to know exactly where the pipe needs to be cut. That way we will not remove any of the total length and have a problem with it sinking further into our tub. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to install our T, and it should be at just the right width. I'm just going to slide it on there, and it comes right to where we made our mark. Make sure that we're lined up evenly. Slide the other side on. It should go right to where we made our mark. It does, and it goes a little bit further, but that's okay. Okay, we're going to put this back in. Still a very tight fit. So all we have to do now to make the exact same one over here is we need to replicate it by using this as a guide for this side. Okay, guys, I'm going to disassemble this, and these pieces right here are going to act as our guide to exactly how long the opposite side needs to be. And so I'm just going to carefully mark it, put them next to each other, and know that's going to work. Make sure that's the same on both sides. And it is. And we'll mark it again once we cut that piece right there. Okay, we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to use these as a guide. Make sure they're exactly the same. Mark where our cut needs to go. We want to get this piece out of the, we want to remove this piece because this is not going into the system. And so we have both sides now, and we're going to reassemble. Okay. Now we have the left and right side of our main tubing, and now we're going to create our cross sections, and we're going to measure those just as carefully. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're just kind of going to wedge our the left and right pipes in place, and it is a very tight fit. We're going to make sure it's in the right place on both sides, and we're going to come in and measure that, knowing that about 1/2 inch is going into each pipe. Might want it a little bit larger so it puts a little bit more force and pushes it out to the edges a little better. That's the next step, is to measure that. All right, we've measured our next section, and that's going to be about 14 2/16. All right, those were 14 2/16, so we're going to measure those very carefully. Going to cut our first piece. Going to do the same thing again and do an exact cut on the exact same width. Also, we're going to have a T in there, so we'll be removing a little bit of this pipe, but this just makes sure that we're at exactly the right width. Now, since each one of these ends has a piece of fitting, a T fitting, we're going to make sure that we do those right in the center and make sure we remove just the right amount of pipe so these pieces will fit back together and it will be just the right width. All right, I'm going to measure on both sides of this pipe about where we know the T is going to slip into. I'm going to remove that much of the pipe by cutting it in 2 places, and then we can install it into our T fitting and test it inside of the tub. Okay, we've pushed it in there. Now we're going to test it by putting it in the tub and make sure it's exactly the right width. All right, we're going to carefully slip these into the 90-degree fittings, and it is a very tight fit. Now, I will say something about this size tub. If we went up to the next size, and they make a lot of different sizes of these black and yellow tubs, but if we went up to a second size, rather than having 1 bar across or 1 piece of PVC, we might opt for 2 pieces of PVC just to get better coverage. But this one is not the largest tote. I think I showed you one of the larger tops off a different tote. So just remember, if you go up to a much larger size, you may want to have 2 pieces of PVC instead of 1. All right, I went ahead and cut the second piece. And we're just going to wedge that in there. And it's probably going to be a little bit tighter. All right, we're just going to try to get this just the right point. There's a little bit of play still in it because this is not glued. We're going to push it down to about 2 inches. Very snug fit. and that will prevent any of the pieces of PVC. Since we're not using any PVC glue, this tight fit will prevent it from popping off. Even though it's not a massive amount of pressure, it will hold together. Okay, now that we've assembled our outer area, we're going to do our inner area, and this piece right here is the key piece that makes a lot of this a little bit more easy to deal with. You don't have to use as much PVC when you have a fitting that has one entry point and 4 exits. So that is the piece right there that makes it a lot easier. The downspout goes directly to the pump, and these other 4 distribute the water evenly throughout the rest of the tote. Now, just to make sure these two are exactly the right length, I'm going to take one of these out and use it as a template for the 2 pieces we're cutting for the center. Now, even though I'm using this as a guide, there's a little bit more play in the center of the tote, because in the corners there's no play, there's no give, but in that center you have a little bit more. So I'm going to add a little bit, maybe 1/4 of an inch to these two, just to make sure that it's still a very snug fit. So I'm going to put about 1/4 of an inch on both of these, and that way I know it's going to be really tight. Now our shortest piece is going to be reassembled back into this side, because we know we added a little bit of length for that centerpiece. And like I said, there is a little bit of play because this is not glued, and we don't want to glue it. We want to be able to do a little bit of tweaking on it. If we did decide to glue it, it would be okay. Most people may or may not realize this, but the pipes in your home are probably PVC, and they're all glued unless you're in a home that has something like copper piping, and even they have a type of soldering that's supposedly not good for you. So that's just something to take into account. Now, our downspout that goes to our pump, we're going to make sure that's pointed down, and we're going to try to assemble this. We're going to push this in pretty firmly on both sides, and if we have to, we could take a little bit off, but it's really tight and it can be moved around, but still, we still have 2 more pieces to cut and our downspout going to the pump, but it's a really tight fit. Okay, so our centerpiece, I want it to push a little bit against the PVC, and I don't think these are made exactly the same way as the standard pieces, so I'm just going to wing it by guesstimating exactly where it needs to be cut. And if I have to go back and recut it again, I can do that, but I want it to put a little bit of force in there to act as a little bit more of a wedge to increase the unlikelihood of it sinking down in there. And of course, we have our center post, so that's not going to happen. It's more likely to flip like that, maybe, and move down. But with the lid on it, that's not going to move but maybe an inch or so. So that's our first piece. We're going to cut that and test it. All right, let's cut this piece right here. Sorry for the noise. I know it's probably awful. All right, and this is going to go like that. I'm going to push that in there as far as we can, and we're going to pull this out. I'm going to have to use a little bit of elbow grease to get this to fit in there. All right, with a little bit of creative force, we have that in there. Everything is really tight. I'm going to cut this last piece to go on the opposite side. All right, and we're going to probably loosen up each side over here, so we'll have a little bit more of play in there so I can force it in there a little bit easier. Without that, it gets really difficult, so it's a little bit easier to put together. Okay, I'm just going to push as hard as I can on all sides, and that is really, really a snug fit. It's really tight, so it's going to keep it from snapping, coming apart under any amount of pressure. And I'm just going to kind of move it around until we're about 1 inch all the way around below the surface. And let's just take a look at it there. I'm hoping this is in the picture good, but like I said, if we had a larger tote, instead of having one crossbar, we'd probably go with two here and here, but this is not the largest tote size they have. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to get an idea of how long our post needs to be coming out of the pump. Now this is moving on the bottom, as you can see, so we want to make sure that it's really a tight fit, but it's not going to cause it to pop out. So I'm just going to take my ruler. I'm going to guesstimate it's going to go about ½ inch into there, ½ inch there. So it looks like about 7 1/4 is going to provide a good distance. And of course, like I said, there's a little bit of play there, but we're sitting on top of another tub. And I think as I push down, I think it's 7 1/4. So let's try that. If not, I'll recut again. All right, I've marked our center post that comes out of the pump at 7 1/4. And I'm going to cut it just beyond that, maybe 1/16 or 1 millimeter, just to make sure that we have a nice tight fit. All right, let's put this bottom piece into our pump. Okay, and we're going to put the second piece on our cross fitting. Well, that is a really tight fit. So the next step is going to be installing our spray drip jets, and we're going to put those about every 4 or 5 inches inside of here to make sure there's even coverage. And the ones on the side will not be 360s. These will be 360s. These in this side will be a smaller radius to keep it from just splashing up against the side. It can go out towards the root systems instead of just wasting water going to the sides. Now the key component to getting these to stay inside of the PVC is a tap and drill set. One creates the hole for the sprayer, but this one actually creates a thread inside the hole. So I don't know if you can see that clearly, but that actually creates a thread. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to drill our holes. Okay, we need to mark these now. I'm going to eyeball it. I'm going to guesstimate about every 5 inches. So I'm just going to mark each one where I want. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but just our goal is to give even coverage. Okay, now we're going to drill our holes. I'm going to do that in time lapse so you don't have to be bored to tears. And I'll just show you how that goes together. Now we have all of our holes drilled. I've carefully ran my hands over to make sure that I didn't miss anything. I can fill each hole that was drilled. And the next thing is we're going to use our tap to create the threads. Now I will say this about doing this. You want to make sure you keep the drill straight up and down. You don't want to do it at an angle because the threads will not be right and it will not thread in there easily. So remember, let the drill do the work and hold it straight up and down, and just slowly, if you don't have a variable speed, you can just lightly hit it like that until you get it done carefully. It may take 2 drills. It may take 2 times of doing this to get the hole to just the right size, but I'll test each one after we get all of our threaded holes done. Now, as I mentioned before, these spray heads, not all of them have a complete 360 radius. These red ones do. These blue ones spray out in this pattern like a 180. So just remember, I'll put the link to these, but you just want the spray going away from the outside of the tub and covering this inside area where all your roots are going to be. I'm going to finish this up and go through each step. Remember, the thing about this tap is you want to be very careful about not overdoing it. The first time it may not be a perfect fit. You may have to go back in and drill a second time. So just remember, your tap may require 2 times to get the threads just right. So guys, I'm down to my last threaded hole for our spray heads. I will tell you that sometimes it does take 2 or 3 attempts to get the hole just right. So just remember, be patient and take it one step at a time. If you do make the mistake of threading it too large, a little bit of PVC glue you can put on the threaded part and that will hold it in place. So just remember, If it falls out, you made the hole too big, just take some PVC glue and you can do that. So let's make the last hole here. Now I think that 3 attempts at drilling the hole just right for the threads is about the right number, but sometimes it even takes more than that. But putting a little bit of force when you're screwing it in will catch the threads, and then you can feel it catch because it becomes much harder to turn. And just make sure your spray head is faced in the right direction. This is the back, this is the front, so it's going to spray out like that. All right, let's attach our PVC to our pump. And it's a really good fit because it's very tight. You can see I'm having to put a little bit of force to get it to go in there just right. We're lining it up, pushing it into the pump, and we don't have to worry about any of the PVC coming apart because it is such a tight fit. Also, I don't even think the pump could force this off. So we're going to do this as the last step. We're going to do our test, and we'll put our lid on and make sure everything's working properly. Now, I want to throw one more last thing at you. If you live on an apartment or you have a balcony, condominium, and you can't just dump this water out because it would go over the side of your balcony, or you just want to pump it out with a hose, you can attach one more T along one of the pieces, then put in a piece of short PVC into the top of this one, and then attach this right here. This is a piece of threaded PVC. This goes up to a 3/4, so it upsizes from 1/2 inch to 3/4. This piece, you can attach a hose pipe and run it back into your apartment, into a drain, bathtub, whatever. But when it's not in use, thread it with some PVC tape, plumber's tape, then put the cap back on, and then so while it's running, you don't have to worry about any water leakage, but then when it's time to drain it, you don't have to worry about carrying this somewhere a long way. So that's really important for somebody with mobility issues that can't pick up this when it's half filled with water because it is quite heavy. So you could drain it fairly easy just by running the pump. It would run it all the way to the bottom and you would dispose of all the water in your system without having to pick it up. Okay guys, I'm going to fill it about halfway up so there'll be enough pressure going to the pump to allow there to be enough pressure to each spray head. There's a little bit of a downward spray to each one of the nozzles. So since this is not glued, you can twist them just a little bit to bring it up to make sure it's hitting the base of each pipe. So just remember that you can adjust it, tweak it, whichever way you need it. There's water going in all directions. Some of them, I probably need to wash out the pipe because I didn't do a good job of that as I was drilling. I'm going to come back, wash everything out, and then retry it again. So guys, I want to show you, maybe demonstrate a little bit more what I was talking about. Rather than have them straight up and down, I've twisted each pipe. That way it has a little bit more of an arc towards the root system. We just want to make sure none of the roots dry out. So that's what I've done all the way around the outside, is I've twisted each pipe. So now that it's in place, it's going to have a little bit more of an upward spray. I didn't want to do that to begin with because I don't want it spraying all over the greenhouse. But that's one thing to remember. You can tweak this as you go just to make sure that it's getting all the roots and they're constantly getting water. So guys, the system is running right now and I hope it's not drowning me out. But what I want to show you is you need to go through each pot as you're tweaking the system to make sure that every single pot is getting water. So you just kind of come up above it and look and see if there's any pots. This pot may need more water, so I need to twist those pipes up so to give a little more upward trajectory. And I see a little bit here. There's a few that are not getting enough water. A lot of them are getting a lot of water, but we just have to kind of go back and forth and tweak the system until we get it just right and make sure that every single net cup is getting water. So I want to anticipate a few questions that might come up about timing. Now, I've got an outdoor timer that I'm going to set for 30 minutes on and 30 minutes off, and it's safe inside the greenhouse or if you wanted to use it outside. It's got 2 plugs on the bottom and it's got 1 plug going into it. So if you wanted to hook up 2 of these, you could easily do that, and you cut your power consumption by 50% by having a timer with 30 minutes on, 30 minutes off. You just want to do that because you don't want to have it off for multiple hours. You want the roots to stay moist and not allow them to dry out. So just remember, a timer will save you money and it's a key component to the system. Hey guys, I just want to say thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you found something interesting or if you have a comment, please leave that down below. I hope you'll like and subscribe. Have a great day.